Shalom Aleichem, welcome back everyone, as we are here together with our Thursday night class, getting ready for Shabbat, Parshat Korach. I'd like to start off with the story. The story is brought down in Rav Druk's Sefer on Chumash, and the Dorosh Mordechai. He says a story about a Jew who was living in Eretz Yisrael, who saved up a lot of money. And in those days, they had something that was called a Napoleon, a golden Napoleon coin. What this was instead of having, we have wire transfers and you're able to take money from one place to another place. This was a coin that you put a lot of money that's worth, and you got this coin. This was worth a lot of money, and you were able to take this coin from place to place in your travels, and you were able to do business with it because that one coin was worth a lot of money. And so this Jew saved up a lot of money, and he was able to take all that money and put it onto this golden Napoleon. At this time, in Eretz Yisrael came the new invention or new candy, the lollipop. And the son of this man who had the golden Napoleon, he wanted to get a lollipop. His parents weren't home. He came to the house and he was looking for some money. He goes into his parents' room, and he finds in his parents' room, a golden coin. So this young boy takes the golden coin and decides, I'm going to go and buy a lollipop. And he gets the lollipop, he comes back home. His father sees him sucking on a lollipop. He says, where'd you get it from? He says, I got it from the candy store. How did you pay for it? He says, Todd, don't be upset, but I took the golden coin that I found in your room, and with that coin, I bought the lollipop. The father went crazy. The father said, that's my golden Napoleon. That's all my money worth. Everything was in there. How did you just take it? So he said, did the candy man, the grocer, did he give you change? He said, no, he didn't give me any change. Immediately, the father ran to the grocery store with the lollipops were being sold. And he comes to the man, his name was Amram. And he tells Amram, my son paid you, he bought a lollipop from you, and you didn't give him back any change. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. Your son bought it, yes, but he paid me with a copper coin. And that was the amount that the candy costs. I said, that's why I didn't give him back any change. He says, you're Russia, you're lying. He gave you a golden Napoleon. He says, golden Napoleon? I didn't see any golden Napoleon. What are you talking about? He says, no, you did. You took the golden Napoleon. You're a thief. You're a Russia. You're a liar. And you're not giving back my money. No, what does a Jew do when they get into Machlokes? They went to Beit Din. They went to the house of court, the courthouse, and the Dayanim, the judges, heard the story from both sides. And they said, Amram, you're modeh b'miktzos, you're admitting to something, admitting to part of it. The halacha is, you have to swear that you didn't take the other part. Amram didn't have a choice. He didn't have money, like the worth of a golden Napoleon to give it. And so he swore, as the truth was, that he didn't take a golden Napoleon, and a golden Napoleon never came his way. And that's the way the story went. And the people of the city where this was happening, people started taking sides. Some people said that Amram was a thief, a Russia, Marusha. It's the only coin they had in the house was a golden coin. He took it, and he's not giving back change. Other people were taking this side, that side. And it became a big Machlokes in the whole city of who was right, who was wrong. And Vahi Ayoim, and it came that day, a few months later, a knock on the door of the man who lost the golden Napoleon. And there was a Jew standing there. And he said, listen, I have to tell you the truth. A few months ago, I was in a desperate situation. I was needing money. And I was walking around the streets. I saw a little boy having a golden Napoleon in his hand. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, this kid doesn't know what he has in his hand. I'm going to go save it, find out where he lives, and I'll go return it to the family. And so I ran and I took it from him and I gave him a copper coin instead. And I took the golden Napoleon, I asked him where he lives. and I was on my way to return it to you, but then I said, you know what, I'm in such a bad situation, I really need the money. I decided I was going to use it, and then as soon as I can get the money back, I would give it back to you. And I'm so sorry that this happened, and it took me longer than I thought, but here I am. I want to make tshuva. I should never have taken it, but now I want to make tshuva. I want to give it back to you. Here, please take it. Now Amram felt really bad because the owner, the father felt very bad because Amram really was honest. So Rav Druk in his Sefer, he writes a question. He says, who in this story goes to Gehenna? Is it Amram? Why should Amram? Amram never did it. He's the victim in all this. Amram was an honest grocer. He got a copper coin. He swore he got the copper coin. The guy's a tzaddik. He didn't do anything wrong. The father of the boy, what did he do wrong? This is the situation that came to him. He was missing a coin. From what he was able to investigate, he realized it went to Amram. So he took it to Beit Din. So he wasn't wrong. The Dayanim, they did what they did. The guy who took the coin knew he did something wrong, but he came, he did tshuva. He returned it. He said, I'm sorry. So who in this story is really the bad people? And so Rav Druk says, you know who in this town, in the city, this whole story, who was the wrong people? It was the people in the city who started to talk. It was the people in the city who started to take sides. He's right, he's wrong, how could he, how could they? They got involved in a Machlokes, the Riv Shelo Lachem. It was not for them. It was not in their fight, none of their business, and they got involved in it. That is the people who are going to Gehenna. Those who are making the Machlokes.
The whole town?
The people who were talking. Those people, the townspeople who were talking, who continue to brew the Machlokes, those are the people going to Gehenna. It says in this week's Parshat, you shouldn't be like Korach and his congregation, which means a person shouldn't continue a Machlokes. We should try on the opposite, to stop Machlokes. If Chas Shalom Machlokes is going on in Shul, you're not supposed to take sides. You're not supposed to get involved at all. You should, instead, what you should try to do is try to calm the situation down. There was a Rav in a certain shul, and the congregants in the shul started to have a Machlokes. So the Rav wanted to get involved, and the Rav wanted to make peace. His family told him, you shouldn't get involved. It's not kovedik. It's not for your honor. It's going to bring you busha. It's going to bring you embarrassment to get involved. And he said, I want to ask you something. He said to his family. He says, when we finish Shmona Esrei, we end off with Oseh Shalom Bimromav. Right? Oseh Shalom. He makes peace. He says, why do we back up when we saying Oseh Shalom? We go 3 steps back. Oseh Shalom Bimromav. He says, why are we going backwards? Why are we turning to this side? Why are we turning to that side? We do it. That's the halakha. But he says, why are we doing that? He says, you know why? Because in order to make peace, you have to back out of the situation. You have to come from the back. You have to not worry about your kavod. You have to look that way. You have to look this way. You have to look in a way of how I can make peace. Oseh Shalom Bimromav, you want to make peace? You have to back up. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I'm not going to worry about my kavod. Erase my name, put it in, do the different things, in order that there would be shalom. Harisol Reisman, Shlita, Rosh Yeshiva Torah Vadat. By the way, the last Torah comes from Rav Reisman. He quotes Rav Druk. And here, again, we have Rav Reisman. And this week's Parashah, he quotes from Rav Pam. He says, here's a 3-step formula to always have shalom, not to have machlokes. He says, he brings down the Yiddish words, we'll just say the 3 steps in English. He says the first step is to be able to enjoy someone else's success. To be able to see someone have something that you don't, and have something good, and be happy for them. He says that when a person does this, he'll be happy himself because he's happy for someone else. When you're not happy for someone else, you get upset, you're always angry. But if you're happy for someone else, then you'll be happy too. So that's the first thing. Be happy with everyone's success. Number 2, he says if it's too hard to do that, number 2, you have to overlook. Amen. So I had this in yeshiva also. I had a Rebbe I once came to him and I said, listen, I see this and I see that and I see this and I see that. He says to me, you're looking too much. He says, you have to stop looking. And in order to live a good life, sometimes you have to not see things. You have to overlook things. He says, you want to avoid machlokes, you want to avoid anger, strife, all these things. You have to know when to choose your battles. You have to know when to overlook certain things. If you're going to fight with your kids and nitpick on every single little thing, they're not going to listen to you and they're not going to do anything you want either. You have to know when certain things you get involved, certain things you don't get involved. Okay? Rav Pam brings down, in the verse from Rav Pam, he brings down a story that there was a shul and the president of the shul got in a fight with the rabbi. The president of the shul got in a fight with the rabbi of the shul. So they was going to a showdown. So the president was davening. And, they're usually, you wait for the rabbi. The cover is you wait for the rabbi to finish Shmoneh Esrei before you start. He didn't wait. And he went straight in. So after Shmoneh Esrei, after the prayer, the rabbi came over and said to him, you don't have cover of Torah. How could you not wait for me? Da, 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 da. And he got his wish because everybody was watching how the rabbi was screaming. And the kavod of the rabbi went away. And this guy got it. If he would have overlooked this guy would have been seen as someone who was a chutzif, someone who's not waiting for the rabbi, and people would have taken that and taken the rabbi's side. But since the rabbi didn't overlook, so Rav Pam says, rabbi didn't overlook, he lost his kavod. So we have first thing, be happy with someone else's lot. Second thing, you have to learn how to overlook. The third thing Rav Pam says, in order to have shalom, is you have to learn how to forget. You have to really learn how to forget. Forgive and forget. Forgetting is very important, right? Hashem gave us the ability to forget. We have to know how to use the ability to forget. Don't forget Hashem, but rather forget things that might cause problems, might cause issues. Everybody in their lives, in their marriages, have things that have happened that if you keep on to it, you're not going to have a happy life. But if you learn how to forget and move on, really move on, that would bring a person much more happiness and content in life. Rav Pam says, on this week's Parshat, he brings from the Hafetz Chaim in his Sefer Avah Chesed, he says, here are some ways to stay out of Machlokes. Number one, he says, whenever you hire somebody, the number one thing to do here, you work for somebody, right? When you work for somebody or you're getting a job for somebody, he says, try your best to get the details down. Because what happens, two people, friends, Hamish, a guy, you hire him, can you paint the house? Can you do the pictures? And he says, yeah. How much? We'll figure it out later. We'll talk about money later. We'll talk about this later. What happens then? Nobody talked about it. So now the person who hired the guy to do the job is expecting X, Y, and Z. The guy who's doing the job is doing A, B, C because he never told him that he wanted X, Y, and Z. Then he wants this amount of money, and he says, no, you didn't do the job I wanted. And everyone gets into Machlokes because they said, we'll talk about money later because we're friends. The Hafetz Chaim says that is the worst thing to do. If you're friends, tell them straight up, I want to be friends with you now and later. So let's clear up what we're going to do, what's expected, how much you're going to charge me. And this way, everybody's on the same page, and everything is going to get done the right way. Hafetz Chaim continues and says a pasuk in Tehillim, Vakesh shalom radfeu. Person should seek peace and pursue it. You know how the Hafetz Chaim learns this up? The Hafetz Chaim learns this up that it's the same way a person has to buy a nice lulav, buy an etrog, buy these different things. He said a person has to also invest money in keeping shalom. I have a friend, Shlita, from Bnei Yisrael. He says an amazing story, a true story that happened. He says in one of the apartment buildings, there was a guy who had a subscription to the newspaper. Did you have a newspaper? And the newspaper would come to him, and every morning he gets the newspaper, he opens it up, and he looks all crumbled up. It's like it's been used already. So he decided one morning he's going to stay up to see what happens. And there he sees, as they're coming to deliver the newspaper to his door, his next door neighbor comes, takes the newspaper into his house, reads it, then packages it back, puts it back, and puts it in front of his door. This guy was livid. He came over to him, how can you do this? He said, what do you mean? I'm just taking it. I'm not ruining it. I'm giving it to you, and you get to read the newspaper also. There's nothing wrong. So he was really upset. So he went to his rabbi. He says, Rabbi, what should I do? That my neighbor keeps taking my newspaper. I'm really upset. I want to, do something about it. So his rabbi told to him, he said, I have a great idea what you should do. He says, what is it? He says, you should buy him a subscription for the newspaper as well. He says, buy him a newspaper subscription? He says, how much does it cost? He says, about $100. He says, $100, and you can have so much peace, so much shalom. just for $100. Imagine that. And he knew, he says, no, but he did it. This is the guy back in the days when they listened to their rabbi. So he went and he bought a $100 subscription to a newspaper. And he came back to his rabbi and he told his Rebbe, it was the greatest thing I ever did. I am in peace. I get my newspaper. He gets newspaper. $100. It's a couple of cups of coffee. You go to Starbucks and Chashalom. If you go to one of those, if you go to the Jewish, go to Patis over here. How much you spend for one drink? $17, $18, 5 times. It's already $100. You bought a $100 subscription. You made peace. He says, the Chafetz Chaim says, the same way people buy insurance policies. He says the same way you have to put money into keeping shalom. Your person should make what's he called a shalom fund. You have a fund for everything. You have a college fund, a rainy day fund, a scholarship fund. You have to have a shalom fund. This way, when something happens, you already have money that you can use in order to keep the peace. So this comes out from the pasuk that we should not be like Korach. We shouldn't be like Korach and his congregation who were fighting. I want to move on to another topic on this week's Parashah. In this week's Parashah, we have Korach, Datam v'Aviram, the On gets out, and then you have the 250 more people who are joining Korach, right? Now, Korach and his people die, and they die in what's, for our understanding, an earthquake, right? The mouth of the earth opens up, sucks him in, and their families and their children, everything. That's what you see Machlokes does. Machlokes destroys everything, even children. And they all fall inside. But the 250 people that brought the Ketoret and they were trying to be Kohanim, they didn't die in the earthquake. They were burnt. Okay? They were Nisrafim. They were burnt. They had their own onish. They had their own punishment. Rav Gedal Yeshur, in his Or Gedal Yo, he brings from the Shlah HaKadosh as follows. I bring the Yesoid as follows. He says that Korach and his people, the Tam v'Aviram, and those who were making trouble, those were troublemakers. But he says that 250 other people, they actually were trying to become more holy. They actually wanted to become Kohanim. They were the Becharim that were supposed to be doing the Avodah, and then they lost it, but now they wanted it back, and they wanted to become more holy. And so, Rav Shur says, whereas Korach was motivated by Ga'ava, he wanted to be better than everyone else, and the Tam v'Aviram was motivated by being troublemakers, he says that 250 people were like Nadav and Avihu. They wanted to get more ruchniut. But in the end, they were both killed. They both got punishment, and that's why they got separate punishments. Korach got, and his people got sucked into the earth, whereas these 250 people got burnt. Similar to when Nadav and Avihu got punished, right? But the question now is, what did they do wrong? They wanted to become more holier people. They brought Ketoret. That was the whole test. But why were they burnt? Why did they get an onish? Rav Shur brings from the Shlah HaKadosh such an important yesod. The reason why these 250 people who really were trying to do it for good, they really wanted to get more ruchniut, more holy, more spiritual, it's because in order to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish, they associated with Rishaim. And once you associate with bad people, even what you're trying to do becomes bad. This is from the Shlah HaKadosh. Rav Shur brings us down that when a person is trying to do something good, but if he's associated to do that good thing with the Rasha, even though the Rasha is doing it for his own reasons, he brings, for example, that there is a organization that helps people make aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, and they get money from Christian organizations. He says that it is right there the big problem. They're giving it for their own reasons. They're not asking you for anything back. But once you start to associate with bad groups, the whole thing loses its quality. Naftali Bennett's Knesset, right? They all just got together to do whatever they wanted. They all Rasha'im with bad people. Some people who thought they were doing good. Once you get together with bad people, the whole thing is over. Rav Reisman is also this. The Torah also comes from Rav Reisman, and the story as well comes from Rav Reisman. So today you have two Divrei Torah with a bunch of stories from Rav Reisman. Rav Reisman shares a story about a Russian Jew in the 1960s. They're behind the Iron Curtain, they can't come out. In the 1960s, the Israeli army had a stunning victory in the Six-Day War. Many Jews in Russia, even though they weren't allowed to learn Torah, they decided they were going to start learning Torah. They saw the miraculous events in Eretz Yisrael, and so they started doing it hiddenly. They were known as the refuseniks, right? They went and they started to learn Torah underground. They got a basement and they hid and they made sure the KGB wasn't watching, and they were able to start learning Torah. There was one guy, he came to the shiurim, one of these refuseniks came to the shiurim. He would come and sit there, fall asleep. And eventually the shiurim become more popular, more and more people try to fit in. The basement only can fit so many people. And so some of the younger guys walked over to this older guy and said, listen, we see that you're coming, we love that you're coming. The truth is, you're probably not listening, you're not paying attention, and you're not learning. And there are other people who want to come to the shiur and they can't because you're here. We can't go somewhere else. Okay, maybe we can't do those things. We want to ask you, maybe you don't come anymore. Anyway, you're falling asleep all the time. They weren't sure how he was going to respond. And he said to them, I want to tell you something. He says, in the 1930s, during the Stalinist purges, I was in a restaurant, and all of a sudden, Stalin's policemen came running in. They came over to a table, and they started to arrest them, and they started to beat up all these people. They said they were going against Stalin and the Russian government, and so the secret police came and arrested them and beat them all up. And as they were escorting all these people out, they saw me. I was next to them on a table next to them, and they started to run after me, and they started to beat me up. And I started to scream, I'm a loyalist, everything from Mother Russia, I'm for Stalin, I never with anything against, I'm not with those people. And they were beating me up. Finally they stopped. And as they were walking out and leaving me alone bleeding, one of them turned to me and said, if you're sitting close to them, then you're a part of them. And because I was sitting close to them, I got beaten up. So today I'm coming to the shiur. I may not understand what's learning here, but if I'm part of them, if I'm sitting here with them, I'm part of them as well. Therefore, I'm sitting here and I'm not going anywhere else because I'm part of the people who learn Torah. I'm part of Am Yisrael. Being part of something great makes you great. Being part of something wrong, something bad, makes you bad. You can see this very clear, classic example. We'll see that our poskim say that we are not, as Orthodox Jews, we're not allowed to sit on organizations that have a mixture of conservative, reform, Christian, all those different things. Because once a person starts sitting to the sha'im on the same table, on the same thing, it's never going to work out for good. You have to be sitting with good people, connecting with good people to have good outcomes. Chas Shalom, you connect with bad people, that's what's going to happen. Just bad outcomes. Let's move on to our third lesson for this week. Our third and final lesson for this week's Parshat. We know that as Korach and his whole family was being sucked into the earth, falling down deep, Korach's sons did teshuvah. Korach's sons did teshuvah, and they didn't die. We have to know that Korach and his family were all really with Korach in the beginning. His whole wife was the one who made it all happen. His sons were with him as well. But at the last moment, Korach's sons had teshuvah. Bringing down from the Zohar, Harav Avigdor Alevi Nebenshal says as follows, citing from the Arizal as well. This is what he says. In Pasuk it says, Sadiq Katama Yifrach. Right? What is the Safei Tevot? Korach. Sadiq Katama Yifrach. A righteous person blossoms. This is Korach. Says Rav Avigdor Nebenshal as follows. He says Korach was a tzaddik. What he did was just a slight mistake. Last week I had my nephew over from Eretz Yisrael, and at the Shabbos table he said over an interesting mashal. He said there once was a king, and the king said, as Avadia, my nephew Avadia, He said as follows: once as a king, and he asked his people, "Tell me what I'm good at. Tell me what's good about me." So one guy said, "You sing good." One guy said, "You smell good." One guy said, "You dress good." One guy said, "You know how to govern." And one guy said to him, "You don't know how to sing." So he says to him, the king says to him, "How could you say I don't know how to sing? I'm the king. How can you say that? It's chutzpah." He says, "You don't understand. When they all say you're good in one thing, that means you're good only in one thing. And in everything else, you're bad. You're just a good dresser. Everything else is not good. If I say you're not a good singer, that means in everything else, you're perfect. Just one thing you don't know how to do. You don't know how to sing." He said, that's why you see in Parshat Bamidbar, you see all these little sins that the Jews did. These are the 10 things that they did. They spent 40 years in the Midbar. They had so many people, 6 million Jews, and they only did 10 little mistakes. Now, those mistakes were counted as big because they were Dordeya. But it's not to say Shalom they were bad. Rabbi Nibbisel says the same thing when it comes to Korach. Korach was a tzaddik. This was one little thing that he went slightly off the derech, which caused this whole catastrophe. The proof is, he says, that Korach's children made tshuva. They grew up in Korach's house. If Korach's children made tshuva, where did they get that ability to do that from? Where did they learn that from? Where did they learn to understand Moshe was a tzaddik and their father was wrong? They learned that from their father. Korach himself taught them the right derech. Korach went off a little bit. And maybe in a different generation what Korach did would have been the right thing. But his time in that place, the way it came out, it was wrong. And we learned many times already, the difference between right and wrong is like a piece of hair. Small little line. That's it. That's the difference between right and wrong. That's all it was. Korach really was a right person. He was a righteous person. Tzaddik katama yifrach. He taught his children the right way. That's how they were able to do tshuvam. That's how they were able. Korach had. Who did Korach have? Who was his descendant that came out from him? Shmuel HaNavi. If Korach was a Rasha, how did he get Shmuel HaNavi? Obviously, there was a lot of holiness in Korach, his family, his children, as we see. What we see here is that a parent, even though if they made a mistake, they still have such an effect on their children to set on the right path. I've heard many times, and I say this over many times as well, we had our parents living in communist Russia, and maybe they didn't learn Torah, maybe they didn't go to shul, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But to know that today that we're sitting here and we go to shul and we put on tefillin and we pray 3 times a day and all this, it's not because of us, it's because of them. Because they were crying and davening for this as well. So our responsibility is to, whatever they pray for, to make it happen, and our responsibility is to pray and daven for our grandchildren as well, great-grandchildren. Not just to say, it's me, my kid, no. We have an effect on all our future descendants. This is what we have to understand. Rav Heinemann, when he used to give his shir, in Torah V'das, it was once a snow day. 2 people showed up to the whole shir. And Rav Heinemann was giving the shir, screaming and yelling. People said to him, the 2 sisters, "Rabbi, it's just me, it's just him and you." He says, "I'm not just teaching Torah to you, I'm teaching Torah to your children, great-grandchildren, everybody. Whatever I'm teaching you, you're going to be able to pass on." Here in the Peninim Al Torah, he shares a story about the effect that a father, a great-grandfather, anyone, a descendant, can have on his descendants. There was a man in Yerushalayim, and he was davening in a shul Friday night, and as he was leaving, he saw one person in the shul didn't have a place to go. He looked like a Sephardic kid, perhaps from Morocco, a little dark skin, curly black hair. He walked over to him and said, "Do you need a place for Shabbat meal?" And the boy said, "Yeah, my name is Dan. And, he said, "My name is Machi, and I need a place to stay. If you can take me, I would appreciate it." He said, "Sure, come over to my house." They brought him to the house. He had Shalom Aleichem. They made Kiddush. They had bread. Came the fish. And he says, "Listen, do you have a special Shabbat song that you want us to sing?" He says, "Yeah, you know what song I really want to hear? Today in the shul, tonight, they were singing something Dodi. I really like that song. Can you please sing the Dodi song?" He says, "You mean L'chadodi? It's not something usually we sing at the Friday night meal, but if you want it, we'll sing it." And so they sang L'chadodi. Came the next course, And in between, they say the Torah. And again says, do you have a song that you want to hear? And he says, yes, I would like to hear the Dodi song again. Every time he asked him what song he wanted to hear, it was L'cha Dodi. They sang that song 9 times that night. Came after Birkat HaMazon, and this man, Dan, who invited him, says, listen, Machi, tell me your story. It's very interesting. You wanted 9 times for us to sing L'cha Dodi. We don't even usually sing this Friday night after we sing it in shul. We don't sing it at home. Tell me, what's your story? And he says, listen, before I tell you my story, you have to listen to the whole story. You can't get excited right away. You have to listen to the whole story. He says, what's the story? He says, I'm actually from the city of Ramallah, the largest Arab city on the West Bank. My name is not Machi, but my name is Mahmoud. And he said, calm down, but I am Jewish. I was born and grew up in Ramallah, and I was taught from birth how to hate Jews. And it always bothered me, and I fought with my teachers, and I fought with my father. And my father kicked me out of the house when I was a teenager. He said, you don't hate Jews, you don't want to kill Jews, you're out of my house. And one night I got kicked out, and I snuck back into my house to get some clothes, some possessions in a briefcase. And my mother found me. And when my mother saw me, she started to cry. And she said to me, you know, you love Jews because you are Jewish. I'm a Jew. I married your father many years ago. I've been paying the price since then. Here's my Israeli ID. Here is, she gave him some money. She gave him her Israeli ID to prove that he is Jewish. She gave him a picture of her grandparents. And she gave a picture of the grandparents standing at a caver in Eretz Yisrael of their grandparents. And he says, that is my story. And he took out and he showed this guy his mother's birth certificate and her Israeli ID and showed that he was actually Jewish. So now this man hears a story and he says, you said you have a picture of your grandparents by the caver of one of their ancestors. He says, yes. He pulls out the picture from the tattered envelope, and in it showed an old Sephardic family at the turn of the century, and there was a grave right next to them. And reading the inscription on the grave, Dan, who was holding the picture, almost dropped it, rubbing his eyes to make sure that what he was seeing wasn't a mistake. The grave was in the old cemetery of Tzefas, and in the inscription on the grave had Rav Shlomo Alkabetz, the author of the L'cha Dodi. And now Dan said, now it makes sense why you made us sing L'cha Dodi, L'cha Dodi, L'cha Dodi. That's your great ancestor's song that he sang. It's touching you. It's bringing you back to Judaism. So even though somewhere along the line someone messed up and they married a goy and this and that, but you see how the great ancestor's effects continues to affect all his descendants. Which means to us, I think, that we have a great responsibility as the descendants of great people, and because of our ability to have future descendants. So with this, just to quickly review the 3 lessons that we had. We had the lesson of staying away from Machlokes at all costs, and even putting away money to maybe use for a Shalom fund. So we should, even if we had a Machlokes, we'd be able to use some money to make sure that Machlokes goes away. We also learned that if we associate ourselves with wrong people, the whole thing gets corrupt from the start. Right? Just imagine you're baking a cake and one of the ingredients are no good. What's going to happen in the end? The whole cake is going to taste bad. I've tried it. I've seen it happen. Okay? Don't do it. Make sure you use fresh ingredients. You always want to make sure all the combination is perfect, is the greatest. And the 3rd lesson that we learned is that Korach, for all his faults, that was only his fault. That one fault that he made. Everything else about him was great. He grew his children the right way. And because of that, he's able to have Shmuel the Navi. His children were saved because of that. And we have that responsibility as well, as descendants and as those who create descendants. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us that zechut to make sure that we're always on the right path. Shabbat Shalom Lekulam. Thank you.